Welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for women in business. Each week, we feature interviews and advice to help you step into your power and lead your way. Now here's your host, women's leadership expert, Eleanor Beaton.
Hello, this is Eleanor Beaton. Welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for ambitious women in business. And you are listening to episode number 21. Now, I am the oldest of three siblings. So I've got a younger sister, Talitha. She's 6 years younger than I am. A younger brother, Glenn, who is 12 years younger than I am. So I grew up being a little bit of a kind of sister mom to my younger siblings. At least I think so. They might not think so, but I think so. I was the sister mom and never had an older sister, but have always kind of craved the sort of, savvy wisdom that I believe an older sister can provide. And if I did have an older sister, I'd be looking at number one, Linda Davos, who is, we are actually related, and I'm going to be featuring her on the podcast very soon. So you will have an opportunity to hear from her. But the other woman whom I would choose to be my older sister is my guest today on Fierce Feminine Leadership, and that is none other than Vicki Saunders. So Vicki Saunders is a powerhouse, of course. That's why I'm having her on the show. She's a serial entrepreneur who has spoken on stages for TedX and the World Economic Forum. She's the founder of SheEO, which is an organization committed to providing women entrepreneurs with the support, skills, and capital they need to start and scale their businesses. Her mission is to redesign conventional growth systems so we can build a better world and more profitable businesses at the same time. And to that end, Vicki launched a venture fund this year. It's called Radical Generosity. Really interesting fund. The vision is 1,000 women give $1,000, which are invested to women-owned businesses. 10 women are chosen, and they divvy up the $1 million however they want between them. But the deal is they can't all get the same amount, can't be divided equally, nor can one person get all the money. So fascinating. And I was honored to be on stage with Vicki and a group of other women earlier this year at their SheEO Purple Carpet Gala, where we had an opportunity to meet the entrepreneurs who were the recipients of the funding this year, the SheEOs. I'm an investor in SheEO because I truly believe in the cause. I believe that as women, we need to support each other and put our money where our mouths are. So Vicki is an incredibly brilliant, cool, innovative, risk taker, bold, visionary person, which is why I would choose her to be my older sister if that were possible. And I'm really excited to share her with you today. And in this interview, she's going to talk about some really interesting things. First and foremost, she's going to talk about some common ways in which we as women make things harder for ourselves than they need to be. She's going to share some leadership lessons that she has learned along the way. And this is a woman who has taken companies public. She has started companies in other countries. She is, if you want to get some advice on leadership, she's a great person to listen to. And she's also going to give us 3 keys to be more innovative in your business and career. And spoiler alert, one of them has to do with slam poetry. So you definitely want to keep your ears open for that. She also is, a master of the statistics and the research with respect to women and entrepreneurship. And so she's going to be sharing some data with us. Incredible interview here. Now, I realize you're probably listening to this while you're driving, while you're cooking, while you're working out. So if you want to get your hands on a beautiful summary sheet that I crafted myself. I did this one myself from the interview with Vicki because I really wanted to make sure we got it right. You can go to eleanorbeatonpodcast.com/21 to get your hands on the summary sheet. So eleanorbeatonpodcast.com/21. You'll see a purple bar. Just enter your name and email address so we know where to send the summary sheet. And I've literally got this printed out. I keep it beside me because the wisdom in here is so great. And take a listen to the interview. I think you're going to love it. Here we go. Vicki Saunders. Hello, it's Eleanor Beaton, and welcome back. It is a delight to welcome you to Fierce Feminine Leadership Live, Vicki Saunders.
Thank you very much.
So I've given our listeners the official background about you. I'd love to hear a little bit more of the sort of unofficial background. How did you arrive at this point in your career?
Well, it's been a long journey. I actually didn't think I'd be an entrepreneur when I was getting started out with my life. I've always been sort of seeking a place where I could be the most free. And so in retrospective, sort of looking back, it makes sense to me that I ended up as an entrepreneur. But the thing that really changed my life is I was in Prague right after the wall fell down and had this most incredible experience where I was standing in the square with hundreds of thousands of people who were all dreaming about what they were going to do now that they were free. And every conversation around me was, what are you going to do now that you're free? And people were changing their lives. And I thought, oh my God, I'm free too. What am I going to do? And I looked around me and picked a business area. I started an English language school, and then I started a retail store, and I became a real advocate for entrepreneurship over there. And ever since then, I've just sort of had the bug of stepping back, looking at what you see in front of you, finding a problem that speaks to you, and then jumping in to solve it. And I've created a number of companies along the way. It's been an unbelievable journey. One of the sort of threads underneath all of my work is impact. I've been very much obsessed with figuring out how you can redesign our societies, our systems, our industries to work for more of the planet and to create a better world while you're building a business. And about 20 years ago, that wasn't a cool thing to do. It was either you make money or you do good. It was very bifurcated. And I feel like now we're in this really exciting time in the world where everybody's looking for new models that feed us and the planet and do good, as well as make great business sense.
That's really interesting, and when you look at your career and your journey, and I've heard you reference this before in interviews that, being kind of ahead of the curve, being a very early, like an innovator. I know that there are going to be women who are listening who are maybe in that same position, that their ideas are actually early. SheEO is 2 decades old, and really now is the time that the rest of the world is catching up to the power of women in entrepreneurship. So I'm just curious about, for the women who are listening who are also, 2 steps ahead of what's going on around them. Do you have any insight or advice on how to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenging thing because, one of the most important things for an entrepreneur to tackle is timing. You could have the most amazing idea in the world, but if it's ahead of its time, it's super tough. And so I conceived of the idea, of the very sort of germination of the concept of SheEO, 15, 16 years ago. When I talk about it being a 2 decades long initiative, for me, that's the culture change starting now. We need a generation to make that change. So that's a forward-looking statement as opposed to the back. But having been ahead of the curve, it's tough being ahead of the curve. I remember a company that I had, and I was living in the future, basically, in this place where we could have both things at the same time, and people were just like, you must be crazy. And so part of the challenge for an entrepreneur, and one of the things I learned as a coping strategy, was to make sure I surrounded myself with my tribe. And those are, people who resonated with what I was talking about, who didn't think I was crazy. And I made sure I had a good support circle around me of people who basically saw things the way I did, or at least weren't constantly reminding me of how out of step I was. It's super tough when you have a great idea to take to market, to just do it on its own. But to be surrounded by people who are naysayers is really tough. So I would encourage everybody to try and find people who see the world the way you see it, and not to isolate you from the rest of the world. It's important to pay attention to what is open to being received by the world right now. But I also think having a good support circle is absolutely critical.
Speaking of tribes and support circles and people who are like-minded, I'd love, we've referenced SheEO. I'd love to hear a little bit more about this organization and its mission.
Sure. So SheEO, as I mentioned, we've experienced women entrepreneurs have been underfinanced, under-celebrated, and under-supported for decades. It's been incredibly difficult. So even 4% of venture capital goes to women. It's been like that for decades, and nothing has really changed. We have been generally under-celebrated for that same amount of time, and I just sort of stepped back and thought, how could we redesign things so women get what they need? And I think the timing on this is incredibly important because there's all these studies coming out now showing that if you have women in senior leadership, companies perform better. that, in fact, if we financed women entrepreneurs to the same degree as men, we would create 6 million jobs in the next 5 years. So there's just a complete understanding and a ton of data to back up that women are an economic powerhouse that hasn't really been tapped into before and haven't been supported. And if we were, we could have a dramatic impact on the economy for good. So there's all of that happening at one point. And so we sort of stepped back and thought, how do we solve these 3 problems? There are 3 almost intractable problems that have been sticking with us for decades. And I just took a number of trends that are coming through the pipeline and created a new design model for that. And we call it radical generosity. So we bring together the themes of wealth, which is the largest wealth transfer in history is happening right now. And women are set to inherit 75% of the world's inherited wealth. We're starting businesses at almost twice the pace of men. And we have a buying power, which is unbelievable, 80 to 85%, depending on which stats you're looking at. So we have buying power. We have a pipeline with incredible companies. We've got some wealth. And then there's this new crowdfunding mechanism that's emerging. And women are 4 times as likely to be financed on a crowdfunding platform. So I basically mashed these all up together. This is the kind of stuff I do when I am an entrepreneur. I synthesize a bunch of trends that I see out there. I'm not necessarily creating something new. Every part of SheEO has sort of been out there in existence, but we've kind of pulled it all together in a unique way. And the idea is gathering 1,000 women who contribute $1,000 each to create $1 million pool of capital. And then we select 10 ventures led by women with at least $50,000 in revenue. And they get 0% interest loans, which they pay back over 5 years. But beyond the money, what they get is access to our buying power, the network of 1,000 women's buying power, our experience, and to help grow their businesses. So they get capital support and our expertise. And this is a model that we hope to roll out around the world. And our goal is to reach 1,000 cities by 2020.
So many questions about this. And what is most interesting to me, there's so many things actually that are interesting to me about this, but is the model by which you disperse that money. Can you tell us more about how that $1 million pool of money gets divvied up among the entrepreneurs?
Yes, absolutely. So what I see in the world, I think we have a lot of mindset challenges that work against women, but one of the biggest ones is winner take all. So out there in the world, if you were doing this in a normal way, there would be $1 million prize. You'd pick one venture and you'd support them. But the world of winner takes all has left us with 85 people having the same wealth as $3.5 billion. So I thought, we need to design new models. And what would be a new way of dividing up that money? And there's a lot of stuff out there saying that peer-based decision-making is actually more effective than expert decision-making. And that may be true given that 9 out of 10 venture companies fail. So what do the experts actually know? So we thought, why don't we try something a bit different here? So the 10 ventures that are selected are put in a room together after they've done some teaming work. And then we ask them to divide up the money amongst themselves. And there's 2 parameters. One is you can't give it all to one, so no winner takes all. And you can't divide it up evenly, which is what we assumed would naturally occur if you put a group of amazing women together who had just fallen in love with each other in their companies. They'd want to make it easy and just have a bit of kumbaya. And I thought, you need to be able to stand up and negotiate on your own behalf and explain why your company deserves the money. And so this is a new way of doing things. We've done a pilot of it a couple of times, and both times everyone received capital. And what tends to happen is a radically collaborative environment and they go line by line through each other's budgets and ask why they're using the money to do what. And so they get very deeply familiar with each other's businesses. It's a completely different approach from what we've seen out there.
And, for you as a creator of this, because this model, and just to emphasize to the women who are listening, it is radical and it is very disruptive. When you looked, because you are an expert, in this space, tell me about what your sense and observations as you watched these women figuring out how they were going to divvy up the money.
Well, so here's the deal. I wasn't actually in the room. So that was even more radical about it. Like we literally said over to them and we were going to live with whatever the result was. And so this was with a smaller pilot that we did it with $50,000, which is still a significant amount of money. We just turned it over to them and stepped back. And so the thing that shocked me, I actually really didn't know what was going to happen, but I didn't believe everyone was going to get money. I didn't think that would be in a scenario. So when they came back and they started reading out the numbers, and they were suspiciously close to each other. I know it wasn't divided evenly, but, there wasn't a huge, huge gap. And then they said everyone's getting money. And I thought, why is everybody getting money? There are 3 ventures here who are definitely ahead of the others. And so they kind of went back to the drawing board after I pushed back a bit. And then they called me back into the room, and they were mad. And they said, we are sticking with what we came up with. And I said, okay, we'll explain why. And they said, everybody in this room is incredible. We've gotten to know them all. They're all going to do something amazing with their life. And if it's not this venture, it will be another one. And we all want to hold each other accountable to hit our milestones and work together. So everybody's getting money. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. And, one of the things I did think that a couple of the ventures were way ahead of the others. And now, a year and a half later, those 3 companies that I would have selected are no longer in business. So what do I know?
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. And what's also really interesting about it is, this idea of that expert-driven decision-making, isn't necessarily better. In fact, the evidence is that peer-based decision. And, of course, you saw that yourself, in terms of you. And
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't do this work and not be humble, that's for sure.
Amazing. So tell me, what feedback have you gotten from the venture capital industry itself from this very disruptive model?
I haven't had that much. I think, I think people are looking at this, and those with quite a bit of vision are like, wow, this could be really interesting. But the way that we're starting out is the money is not actually returned to the investors, the 1,000 women. It's an act of radical generosity. So I think if you look at it at the surface, a lot of people just say, this isn't really about investing. It's kind of philanthropy, even though you don't get a tax receipt. It sort of sits in the middle between philanthropy and investing, and it confuses most people. So if you're stuck in a sort of model of the way you see the world, you don't really get what we're trying to do here. We're literally trying to lead with relationship and engage people together to realize the impact they have, and then to drive it forward. Some of my friends think that we're like on the path to create a new bank. They're wondering, is this really like, if you get women starting to pool their capital together to invest in women, there's a natural conclusion out of this that becomes, like crowdfunding, people are saying are the new banks of the future. So we'll see where that goes. But I think that most of the people in the quote unquote serious game of venture capital are not really paying attention to us.
Got it. So, one of the things that I've noticed from you, I've been following you for a long time, listening to a lot of your interviews, had the opportunity to speak to you a couple of times. And, you talk about breaking down problems that, one of the things that you do as an entrepreneur is kind of identify the problems and then start synthesizing things that already exist together to create a solution. And this idea, this theme of synthesis comes up. My hunch is that this is probably something that comes naturally to you. But for women who are really looking to kind of sharpen and hone their entrepreneurial skills or instincts, whether they are entrepreneurs or they're working within an organization and want to be an intrapreneur, what can you give some insight on how to do that? How we can become better at identifying the problems, at synthesizing the things that exist into a unique solution?
Sure. Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, I think a lot of the businesses that I see women come to me with are process innovations rather than product innovations. And I've done quite a bit of research on this to try and get underneath it. And it seems like women view things in a holistic manner. We look at the entire system. And in general, I mean, there's a bunch of research to show that men look much more sort of specifically and narrowly at things. And so it's that, the bright, shiny object, the product innovation. And those are easier to explain, like Airbnb for cats. People can put it in a sentence, but the process innovation is harder to explain because we're really trying to redesign the way something works to make it more efficient. And so for me, the thing that's been most effective to help me with this is I have very diverse interests, and I specifically widen my circles whenever I feel stuck. So if I'm working on a problem and I can't really figure out a way in, I try to go to a completely different sector, a different industry, a different culture, to put myself in, go to the theater and see something I would not normally see, really sort of stretch my boundaries of where I've been looking and listening, because I often find that those insights that come from a completely different perspective open up a door. So an example of that was I was speaking at the Tallberg Forum in Sweden. It's 400 miles north of Stockholm in this tiny little village. And this spoken word poet got up on stage and started talking about sovereignty. And we were talking about Syria and sovereignty in the world, super heady stuff. And she got up and did this like slam poetry thing on her body as a sovereign and talking about acupuncture and how when you have acupuncture, someone reads the system, they put a needle in you at a certain point and it opens up the system and it unblocks the system. And I had this like immediate, oh my God, what are the acupuncture points for changing the system for female entrepreneurs? And it was from listening to that gave me this insight. And then I spent about 12 months talking to people all over the world trying to figure out, like, what are the acupuncture points for changing the system? Because you can't possibly change all of the systems. So what are the three things that if you do that first, will blow it open? And the result that I kind of came through was media, education, and finance. If we don't have stories of women who are succeeding on their own terms in new, unique ways, and we're redefining what winning is, we're never going to get there. If we don't have finance, that's a huge issue. And if we don't have new models coming up, we're never going to change the world. And so all those three came from a slam poet in the north of Sweden, right? So it's like really widening your circles to get more creativity and more insight.
I love that. So, and there's a couple of things going on with that. So first is, and tell me where I'm wrong, but I'd like to synthesize here. I mean, one of the things is, really being clear about the problem that you're trying to solve. The next is, especially if you're stuck, broadening your circles of inspiration. But it's not just that. It's in using that insight to create a model that you can then use to kind of push you through. My sense is that those are the kind of three steps that are taking place in what you've just shared with us. Do I have that right?
You're brilliant. Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah, that's a fabulous technique. I'm going to try it out. So getting back to SheEO, what is it? You have an incredible book called Think Like a SheEO. And for those of you who have not had the opportunity to read it, I highly encourage you to do so. It really helps you get more into Vickie's brain. What does it mean to think like a SheEO?
I think there's a few key elements. The first thing is to really go deep and figure out who you are. We sort of have three kind of key components to this: I, we, and it. So part of it is, who are you? What are you masterful at? What energizes you? What excites you? What are your values? So before you do anything, get clear on that. Knowing yourself is so much a key part of being a successful entrepreneur. So there's the I component. We walk you through a bunch of exercises to figure that out. Then the we component is really, what do you need to surround yourself with? Like, so you understand what you're good at. What are your gaps? What are these things that you need on your team, the skill sets specifically to help you succeed? And then the it, the basic skills of running a business. You can Google almost all this stuff. The first two are personal work you need to do, and more of the quote unquote soft skills, which we've sort of blown off for many years, which now everyone's saying those are the only things that matter. Like, you can go Google how to create a spreadsheet, and get 25 different examples of how-to videos. It's the doing the personal work stuff that's tough. And so we walk you through a lot of exercises and a lot of stories to show how you can really leverage your own personal successes. And I mean, we're in a world of 7 billion people. You need to differentiate yourself, which means you need to know yourself and then be able to tell your story. And I, have a bunch of different chapters in there. We have 8 different principles of being a SheEO, one of which is it doesn't have to be hard, which everybody always pushes back on with me. I know it's been incredibly hard to be an entrepreneur for me in lots of times, but I find that when I'm actually in my zone, working from my mastery with great timing, with a great team, it's almost effortless. Like, you're in flow and it's great. And when you're not, it's bumpy and hard and challenging. And so how can you increasingly design what you're doing to leverage your most amazing talents? And I think in the world today, we're kind of obsessed thinking that, if it's not hard, it's not worth it. And everything has to be hard. And I'm like, no, I'd actually search for the thing that it comes easiest to me that I could achieve in the world. So there's a lot of tools in there to sort of help you through.
That's interesting. And, the whole, it's got to be hard. I mean, to me, that sounds like it's coming from this, the sort of noble hero's journey, where it's all about, finding challenges that get increasingly difficult, overcoming them one by one, and that it does have to be hard. That seems like it's kind of an older narrative, which really leads me to my next question. How are women changing the entrepreneurial narrative? How are we changing that landscape?
Well, I think there are a lot of different ways. In the last, business started out being very community focused, solving things locally, taking care of people in the community, and growing from where. Like the best businesses started as these small hometown community-based things and then grew. And then the pendulum went way, way over to the right or the left, depending on how you look at it, and was all about, maximizing profits with no concern for people or the planet. And now we're kind of trying to find our way back. And one of the things I think that I see women leading is this, pulling back the humanity in the relationship that's really been missing in business. Like all these lines, it's just business. Like that's been an excuse to treat people poorly for the last couple of decades. We're seeing women who are masterful at building relationships starting to really drive business success. So I think that the relationship component, taking care of people, is a huge one. Another one is most of the business that I see coming my way are meaningful. Like these are businesses that are going to create a better world. And I talk in my book how meaning is the new money. And if you can actually substantiate the meaning that's in your business and call on people's hearts for the work that you're doing, you will have people get so rapidly excited about your brand and be your own marketers. You have to have some kind of meaningful component that touches on emotions to really drive business success. I think these are a couple of things that women are doing brilliantly. And I think the third sort of trend that I'm starting to see, it's kind of hilarious, but people are actually starting to care about revenue, shockingly. And we've been, living for the last 10 years or so in this place of traction's all everybody cares about. Get lots of customers and you can figure out how to make money lately. Well, women get to profitability much more quickly than men. There's a lot of data on that. And we also are more capital efficient. And so these are two fantastic assets that women have that I think the world is paying more and more attention to.
Speaking of revenue and profit, there's research from Ernst & Young that suggests that only about 2% of women-owned businesses crack the seven-figure mark.
Yes.
I'd love to hear your insight on this. Is this a bad thing? Should we be concerned about that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I really think that we should be helping women grow bigger businesses if that's what they'd like to do. I mean, SheEO is all about on your own terms. If you want to run a smaller business, great. But if you want to build something bigger, we are very, very committed to helping you do that. And, I think there's this kind of fallacy out there. We talk about lifestyle businesses as if, they're small. But there's these two fantastic women from BC, Leslie Mine-Gast and Marla Kopp, who have a great perspective on this. And I was talking to them recently about it. And they're like, lifestyle businesses are businesses over $10 million in revenue. That's when you can actually have a life because you have a team running the business and you can kind of get up above it and pay attention to the strategy of growing the business in your area. It's much harder to run a business that has $1 million in revenue or less, or even $2 million in revenue and less. Those are tough businesses to run because you're in the business running it. The bigger your business is, the more flexibility and the more of a quote-unquote life you can have, unless you're IPOing and running a humongous business, and then all bets are off on having any life. So the challenge is really how can we help businesses that have the potential to grow and encourage them to get to that next level. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in that. I think there's a ton of opportunity in the Canadian marketplace and outside of Canada to help people go from, high 100,000s up to $10 million in revenue and beyond, and really create the support to grow those businesses.
And what would you say is, what are some of the key components of that support? Because it is really interesting. There seems to be a lot of help for startups, and then, maybe some help for sort of the much larger businesses, but it's that kind of mid zone of established businesses who are really trying to get into, and I love the way you've redefined, or the way that you, Leslie and Marla, have redefined lifestyle business. What are some of the key components of support that can help get entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs, for our focus, from that kind of high 100,000s into the sort of 10 million plus?
Well, I mean, we have some theories on that. We haven't seen a lot of programs that are doing that. There are the women's enterprise centers across this country, I think, have been working on this for a while and have had some success at it. The design of what we're doing with SheEO is very much centered on this. So having a network of women who are invested in your success, using their buying power to help support you, and using their expertise to help you build your business. I think these are critical things. Just the simplicity of I've met so many incredible women who have businesses. I was in Montreal last night meeting with a couple of them, and they have businesses that could easily grow 500%. And in fact, the network of 1,000 women could totally help them do that in 18 months. And they don't really know that they could have that potential. And so part of it is having someone from the outside who's kind of been through it, come to you and say, you can do this. We can help you get there if you want to. And so I think just being surrounded by people who've been there before, who are invested in your success, who want to help you on your own terms, this is something that we haven't had en masse in our marketplace before. And so this is the experiment we're doing with SheEO. We want to really see if women were radically generous with each other and sharing of their learning in ways that was very focused. And so, the 1,000 of us are going to focus on these 10 businesses and help them grow. We'll see how that works, but for sure, having support on your own terms is absolutely critical. There's a lot of support out there that's not on your own terms. So someone will come to you and say, this is, I did this, so you need to do A, B, C, D, and E. I see that a lot with advisors. And I see women just sort of, oftentimes sort of step back and say, that doesn't feel right to me. I'm not going to do that. That's one. And then the financing thing is, of course, just a huge issue. So how do you, a lot of the money wants you to grow faster than you may want to grow. Or have more collateral than maybe you feel comfortable with. And so trying to find new ways of supporting people from a financial perspective that works on their own terms is another piece.
Got it. So to recap, it's really about, in these three pillars, which, is so central to the model that you're building. But the idea of having a network of women who are invested in your success does not need to be a massive network, by the way. So a network of women who are invested in your success,
yep.
The buying power of those women as well, and then their expertise. And, I love the idea that we can tap into the same pool for all of those things in many ways.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something that you talked about earlier, this principle that it doesn't have to be hard. And you've had the opportunity to mentor many, many entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you've seen trends or themes. What are some of the most common ways in which we make it harder than it has to be?
Yeah, well, I'd say the number one thing, and this is a little different with female entrepreneurs and male entrepreneurs, is asking for help. So there's a tendency out there to want to be perfect before we ask for help, which is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. So when you don't know what to do and when you're struggling and when you're confused, that's the best time to ask for help. And I think a lot of people just feel so stuck that they don't even ask for help. We're phenomenal as women at giving. It's the receiving part that we really need to work on. And so that's a gender difference that I've experienced over and over. And so it's another reason why we call this radical generosity, and we practice radical generosity at our events, is creating a safe space for you to ask. Because we're also pretty, in school, pretty early on, we learned that saying that you don't know how to do something, you get kind of hammered in class for that. And so then we start getting used to saying, oh, that's actually a weakness to show you don't understand something. And so I think that's something we have to get out of our own way on asking for help. It's a very, very big one. The other thing is that women in general have fewer mentors and advisors. Fewer women entrepreneurs have mentors and advisors than their male counterparts. And if you have a mentor or an advisor, you're 50% more likely to be in business after 3 years. It's a massive, massive bump that you get if you go and ask for help. So really reaching out and trying to create a network of people around you, as you've mentioned, is, as small as a person, it just doesn't matter. Find somebody who's done something before in your space or even outside your space who has some savvy that you need. And ask for advice, check things out. I also think, personally, I really wanted validation along the way. Like, does this make sense? It makes sense to me, but to somebody else, I want to check it out. And even just getting that sober second thought, I find incredibly helpful. And I get calls like that all the time. Hey, I'm thinking about this. Am I crazy or does it make sense? And you can't underestimate how important it is to have someone go, okay, yeah, that's good. Go for it. And then off you go.
So those are two. So the idea of asking for help and then really getting those mentors and advisors, that's a fabulous statistic. If you have mentors and advisors, you're 50% more likely to stay in business. When you look back, when you look back over your experience and career, is there an example that sticks out to you of a time that you asked for help, even though you may have been struggling with the fact that things aren't perfect yet, but you did it anyway?
Yeah, I've learned the hard way about asking for help. I have this thing where I've developed a muscle, essentially, that I don't want to do. If I'm not a master at something, I go and ask somebody else. So if someone can do something in 5 minutes that would take me 10 minutes, I will literally do the work to find that person. I don't want to work on anything that I'm not passionate about, energized by, and the best at. So that's how I've really built my network over time. And I think, I've had experiences where I haven't asked for help and I wish I'd had a network, but I really had no idea who to call. And so part of the thing is, having those failure points and realizing, oh God, I have a super, big gaping hole in my knowledge of financials. I need to know the 3 people that can help me with my financials in an instant and build that network. So this is also another way I think about networking. I don't think about networking for the sake of networking. I think about it for the way of helping me solve problems when I'm in a bind and I quickly need to call somebody to get help.
Got it. And so another question then around this, as you think about your experience growing companies and, you've had a lot of experience doing that with many different companies, what have been some of the most important leadership qualities or leadership lessons that you have learned?
I think, by far the most important lesson is knowing myself and not just, really getting out of my own way. So, do not let me do details. As soon as I'm on top of details, I follow up for about a week and then I'm just useless and all kinds of balls drop all over the place. I have to be supported by strong operations. And so, part of this learning is being absolutely crystal clear on what you're great at and then building your team to support that. So I'm also a huge student of company culture and how to build high performance teams. This has just been such a big learning for me. I, used to be of the school that, I can just do it faster. I'll do it myself. But I wanted to have a really big impact in the world, and there's no way I could do all the work that I need to. So I needed to understand how to work with people. I needed to understand how to build high performance teams and understand the dynamics of how you check in with each other, how you do efficient meetings, like all of these different things that build strong company culture were incredibly important. And so I think those are really the 2 biggest things is my own ability to understand myself and get out of my own way and understanding how to build really strong teams that can thrive and create great work in the world.
That's so interesting because, this idea of accomplishing things through teams, which can be challenging if you have a hard time asking for help. So,
right.
If we look at potential derailers or obstacles, that may indeed, that inability to ask for help or difficulty asking for help is something that, we as women, as we're really stepping into our power, creating organizations, creating lifestyle or businesses, if that's what we want, that's kind of a big theme. So I love that. Our conference theme is Claim Your Power, Change the World. I'd love to hear one of the most significant instances in your life in which you really claimed your power.
I think for the first time ever, right now I'm claiming my power. To be honest, I've had an incredible journey in the last 25 years. And I really feel like I'm just getting in the zone right now. It's been a long journey of building my confidence. I didn't have a lot of confidence as a young entrepreneur. I was working in fields I had no idea about. I was doing things that I wasn't an expert at and learning along the way. And right now I've been through so many different things that now I can stand where I am and I am clear on my voice. I'm clear on what I want to do. I'm clear on the impact that I want to have. I trust my gut because I've not trusted my gut lots of times and it's burnt me. And I stand in who I am right now like I never have before. And I'm totally ready to be part of SheEO and to be out there talking about this. I feel like my work is really just getting started.
That's just amazing. So tell us, what's next for you?
Well, we are in our pilot right now in Canada. We have had 32 cities from around the world apply to roll out this model next year, from Wellington, New Zealand to Singapore to Sydney, Australia to Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, New York, all over the place. So there's a lot of desire to take this model and replicate it, which I'm incredibly excited about. And I am in. For the next 20 years, this is my work. We're going to take this model and iterate it and learn from it and pull together women who would like to be radically generous with the next generation of businesses coming along, and work on creating these new models to support women's economic empowerment, growth, and also to change the world. I mean, we are supporting businesses that are meaningful, that want to transform communities. And I think company by company, connecting these all together, we have everything that we need to change the world.
So where can people go to find out more about you? Because I know that they are going to want to. We'll obviously link to your site through our conference site, but where can we go to learn more about you? And what action can women take if they want to join the movement that you're creating?
Well, we'd love it if people would come to our website, SheEO.world. So SheEO.world. You can find out more there. There's blog posts. There's links to all of our videos, to media attention that we've had, so you can read some of those articles. We have a YouTube channel. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and pretty much everything there is out there. Everything on the social channels that people are looking at, we are there. I've got a couple of TED Talks up online as well, and my book is available on Amazon. So lots of different stuff out there. We're increasingly doing wonderful events like yours and podcasts and participating in those. So I think those are a few places.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of the women from around the world who have tuned in to be part of this event and to listen to your talk, I want to sincerely thank you for sharing this insight with us. It's been so inspiring and also very practical. I'm walking away with a lot of practical things I can do within my own business and career. So thank you so much, Vicki.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thanks for what you're doing.
Today's episode was brought to you by Bold Woman Thought Leaders, my brand new group coaching program for thought leaders, experts, coaches, and consultants who are tired of playing business and are ready to get known, land clients, and make an impact. If you dream of traveling the world, standing on stage, speaking from the heart, and getting paid to do it, if you want to do deep, meaningful work with influential clients who are happy to pay you well for your expertise and advice, then I invite you to join us for Bold Women Thought Leaders, a 4-month group coaching program for smart women who are ready to grow their businesses by becoming a recognized expert. If you're interested in joining a small cohort of thought leader entrepreneurs who are ready to either launch their business the right way or dial up their sales and growth with a solid business structure designed specifically for people who sell insight and advice, then please reach out to us to learn more about Bold Women Thought Leaders, our 4-month group coaching program. We will send you the details. Simply email us at fierce@eleanorbeaton.com. That's fierce@eleanorbeaton.com. Well, ladies, there you have it. My interview with Vicki Saunders, the founder of SheEO, author of Think Like a SheEO, the creator of the Radical Generosity Fund. So delighted to have her as my guest. Go ahead, visit eleanorbeatonpodcast.com/21 to get your hands on the summary sheet that we created for you. And if you want to learn more about Vicki, you can do so at SheEO.world. All the links are going to be in our show notes, eleanorbeaton.com/21. Go out there, think like a SheEO, be radically generous, and be innovative. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, ladies, stay fierce.
Thank you for listening to Fierce Feminine Leadership. Be sure to head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. While you're there, leave us a fierce review. When you leave a review, your name is automatically entered into a monthly draw. Each month, we'll draw one reviewer to automatically receive a private coaching session with women's leadership expert Eleanor Beaton. So remember, head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Then leave us a review for your chance to win a private coaching session with Eleanor Beaton. Go to eleanorbeatonpodcast.com and sign up to get your free cheat sheet, the 5 critical leadership skills of 7-figure businesswomen. This free download will help you diagnose the exact skills you need to see major growth in your business and career. Head over to eleanorbeatonpodcast.com and get your free download today.